Good afternoon and welcome back to the Board of Supervisors meeting. We will continue our meeting with item 19. Madam Clerk.
Item 19 is from the Administrative Office to adjust the fiscal year 18-19 budget to cover refunds from the Medical Cannabis Cultivation Registration Designated Fund in the amount of $940,043. This budget adjustment requires a 4/5 affirmative vote of the Board.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Supervisors. The item before you, as just mentioned by the clerk, is a request that your board approve a budget transfer in the amount of $940,043 to provide refunds to individuals who paid registration renewal fees or had paid application fees for incomplete fees prior to the implementation of the board's ban of the medical cannabis registration program. Our office has determined that the refunds are an important component of closing out the program as provided for in the board's, your board's ban ordinance. As a reminder, this item was considered by your board on October 9th of 2018, but was not approved. However, following board discussion on January 15th, 2019, staff has placed this item on your agenda for reconsideration. After reviewing previous actions of the board, it is the recommendation of the county administrator that the board approve the budget adjustment. As mentioned, this item will require a 4/5 affirmative vote and does not affect the county's general fund. Any questions? I'll try to respond.
Any questions or discussion from the board? Supervisor Mills?
I do have a question. It says on January 15th that we directed the item to be reconsidered. I had a chance to review the tape of the 15th and also to look at the minutes. I don't know if the minutes are posted, Diane, but the minutes that are in our system right now for that meeting, and could not find that direction in those tapes. Is there a place that I can go to review where that direction was given?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Mills, you are correct, and that's why I did specifically omit that statement. I should have corrected it, and we were not directed to do so. There was discussion among the board members indicated that your board wanted to have this reconsidered, and that was the purpose for the placement on the agenda.
And I would have thought that that would have been part of that discussion in March in the broader context of the marijuana discussion. I just could not find that particular statement.
That is correct. That was when the discussion occurred.
Thank you.
Mr. Stopper?
I have a question for the auditor controller, if she's willing. Are you comfortable in saying that we've closed the books on these registration fees and that all accounts have been accounted for in expenditures?
Yes. So based on the collaboration with County Council, one of the issues that we had is when the urgency ordinance was first approved by the board, there were no policies and procedures established at that time. So the budgets for many of the departments was based on activities that didn't actually line up with what the intent of the urgency ordinance was. And we can argue and debate until the cows come home, you know, what that is. What we asked County Council to do is please offer an opinion as to what would be allowable, legally allowable under the terms of the urgency ordinance that tied to the fees that were collected, and what wouldn't. In essence, we didn't want to find ourselves in a lawsuit trying to debate regulatory versus enforcement. So when that happened, the procedure was developed again after the budget was approved, and then we coordinated with departments to try to get those activities in line with one another. We did have some stumbling blocks, obviously, as time went on, trying to go through all of that, but what we did is we did a very thorough analysis of all of the expenditures that were in there, and also expenditures that we believed should have been in there that were not in there. So it was both. Mm-hmm. And we grabbed central service costs, because there's obviously just costs of doing business, whether it's my office, the treasurer's office, county council, insurance, utilities, IT. We looked at GIS costs. We looked at code enforcement, sheriff's department, planning department. We looked at ag. We looked at every possible department that we possibly could. If the activities that they were doing had another fee source tied to them, well, then obviously you can't double dip, right? So those had to be kind of removed out. But there were activities that they were doing that were specific to the regulatory program. We pulled those costs in. So we kind of did both of that. And then we worked very closely with county council. We worked very closely with the administrative office. We worked very closely with the departments. And so based on all that information, yes, I am confident that what is in that system is what we have. Certainly, we could trip over dollars to pick up pennies. I don't know if that's the best solution at this point. And I think one of the options for closure would be just to go ahead and go through the refund process. We do realize that in terms of refunding the money, it's not as easy as just writing a bunch of checks. There is a whole claims process that would have to happen, verifying that it is a valid claimant. This is very similar to what we have countywide anytime we have a request for refund. We obviously have to verify that the claimant was in fact the person who paid the original fee, or that they paid the original fee at all. I will say there are times where a claimant will come forward, they never actually paid the business license, they never paid the fee, they never paid the taxes, but they still submit a claim for refund. So part of the refunding process is actually establishing a true claimant relationship and verifying that they in fact paid, verifying who they say they are, and then based on that, then we can issue the refund. Part of the struggle that we're going to have is some of the applicants, we don't know where they are, and they haven't reached out to the county. So it's quite possible that we will have to, just under state law, have this money available to be claimed against for 3 years. So part of that analysis really went into trying to figure out what would the cost to the county be over a 3-year period on trying to find these individuals, prove they're who they say they are, et cetera, et cetera. So we did recommend about a 5% administrative fee for not the renewals, but the original application fees, just so we could recoup some of the costs that are going to occur to the general fund, whether it be the planning department or the treasurer or my office or county council. So and I think that that's, it's not a lot, but we think that it will offset costs associated with that.
Right, that makes sense, because there's going to be costs incurred in going through there and vetting whether these are legitimate claims.
Yep.
So we're comfortable in saying that we've been through this entire process and the program has not incurred the cost as much as we have received.
Yeah, I think, part of the issue that we're seeing in trying to get people's minds about how it's not possible that we spent all the money is we didn't have a fully vetted plan. We didn't have a fully vetted program. We had positions that had been approved and budgeted that we didn't hire, or we left vacant. There was a lot of uncertainty as to whether the changing of the board was going to have a ban occur. How quickly was that going to happen? Departments were a little hesitant, or a lot hesitant, of actually filling some of those positions because they were afraid they were going to have to turn right around and let them go. We have a general culture here at this county of just trying to do more with less. So we did find where departments would kind of kill two birds with one stone. So for instance, GIS would look at doing a flyover, but use the same data for tree mortality if it was in the same area. Well, we could recoup the costs associated with that activity off tree mortality grant. So we can't really charge again for commercial
Double dip.
cannabis. That would be a double dip. So it's, resourceful, but that's kind of what happened. So, a lot of the activities that we had planned just didn't happen. And part of it was just this major uncertainty as to where the program was going to go. So with that said, there are unspent dollars. Like I said, a lot of the debate has been regards to whether you could consider it regulatory or not consider it regulatory, whether the fee falls under Prop 26 or whether it doesn't fall under Prop 26. I'm, conservatively, I'm going to go with county council's opinion on what was allowable and what wasn't allowable, and we based our analysis on that information.
Thank you very much.
Supervisor Mills?
Thank you. I'm looking at this from a disbursement point of view, and that not every one of these had the same amount of cost to process an application. It could be all over the board. And at what point and how are you going to figure out what that fair and equitable reimbursement is to that specific applicant versus giving everybody just a blank check or a check for X amount of dollars, averaging it out? And what is the most equitable way to do that?
The equitable way of doing it is because time was not tracked on a per application basis. So the most equitable way of doing it is in fact looking at all of the fee payers and allocating the what's left across all of them. Because you're correct, there could be an instance where one was a really simple application and it didn't cost, but $2,500 to process. And you could have another very complicated application that could have cost 10. There's no basis, and we can't create a basis for that now. Time has already gone by. So at this point, the most equitable method of doing this is looking at all of the fee payers and allocating what's remaining across all of them, regardless of what status they're in, whether they were approved, not approved, yeah.
And you know my opinions on Prop 26. I mean,
Yep.
we've been around that one, so that's not going to be a new issue. Would your office be willing, for the sake of transparency, to allow an independent audit of this entire project?
I have no problem for an audit, but you as a board would need to give direction on what the scope of that work is. The term audit is kind of a very open-ended concept. There's all variations of audits. There can be just kind of were generally acceptable accounting principles and internal controls base. Was it, we have program audits where they are specifically looking at if the intent of the grant or the intent of the program funding was done. We've got those types of audits. So there's a multitude of different types of audits, which means there's a multitude of different scopes of work. You would have to define that. And I think part of the problem has been we have not been able to get a consensus on the board with what that scope of work would be. And we had 5 different opinions at one time as to what the UO fees could have been used for. We can't base an audit on that. We can base an audit on, okay, let's use county council's opinion as the basis for what is allowable, and let's go through doing a scope of work based on that. That's one option. But it's really what it is that you're looking for. And we've thus far have not been able to get a consensus from this board as to what it is that you want to see of an audit. So if you have a consensus for what that is, because we even left one meeting and county council, myself, and the CAO all met to try to figure out what it was that we think that you wanted, and we didn't know. We couldn't figure out what that there was no consensus. So we can't really move forward without one.
And to your point about 5 opinions up here on the board, there was multiple opinions from other elected officials as well as other people. I mean, everybody's got their opinion on how this all played out.
Correct.
It's just a matter of being sure that we've got our ducks in a row. I mean, you'd ask her, they said complete a final audit, and I think that the board needs to really hone in on or discuss the parameters of that audit. And I do agree with you
The parameters
there.
of them and the merit of them. We don't generally audit a fee program. We don't generally audit the building permit fees or environmental health fees or dog licensing fees. That's not been something that we've generally done. We include all of that activity in our county-wide annual financial audit, but not on a program basis. Program basis audits are specifically done because there is a restricted funding source and the granting agency specifically asks for an audit to be done. Whether we had to do an audit for AB 900 when the jail was completed. That was part of our costs for getting that AB 900 grant funding. We've had to do audits because of other federal funding sources. Once we close out Butte Fire and Winter Storm projects, an OIG audit will come in, but it's specific to those funding sources and those expenditures tied to those funding sources. And the difference is in any of those grants, there's policies and procedures and terms and scope related to the audit. In this particular case, it's whatever you want to see. And there is no legal requirement for this program to be audited. It's really at the direction of the board. So if there's a consensus on the board that you want to see an audit for purposes of transparency, that's fine. You just need to tell us what is the basis of the audit, what exactly are you trying to get to the bottom of so that we can develop an appropriate scope and then go out for contract on that.
Thank you. Any further discussion from the board? Seeing none, we will open it for public comment. Again, I request everybody be respectful as they go about this business, and 5 in a row, please, so we know how many people we've got to have talking, and let's get going. Bill, you're first up. Only one speaker today, huh?
One of the problems I had with the whole program was the sheriff's allotment of the fees and regulation. We paid $5,000 per farm for regulation, for the fees. As soon as you hit the sheriff's office, the sheriff hits you again with another $45 per person to do a background check that should have been covered in those fees. Now we're talking about the sheriff couldn't spend enough of that money. He was the hog in the program, it seems. Rightly so, he should have been. He was the one that got new vehicles, he's the one that got new people, along with the other people that got hired. When you look at the breakdown, he spent about $1 million and everybody else spent the other $1 million. Now you got $1 million left over. Dennis wants to spend more money of those fees to do an audit when it's been audited already. I think the money needs to be returned to those people that especially paid an additional $5,000 for a program that you were going to renew but then voted to stop. Yet to be able to continue in the program, you had to pay that $5,000 and you never got to plant one plant. You never harvested a thing. Many people in this program lost money. Personally, we lost over $100,000 in this program. Thank you very much, board, the 2 of you that remain. I don't understand. It is legal. It is now legal in 30 states. This was a fee-based program. You didn't spend the fees. Give them back.
Hello, Board. Trevor Whitkey, Calaveras Cannabis Alliance. I have a number of questions about this refund. I'm wondering whether or not, who applies. I heard Rebecca Callan say that it applies to everybody regardless of their status. I'm wondering if that goes all the way back to the original 770 applicants who applied in the program, and if all of us are going to get an averaged proportional amount back as a refund. I'm also wondering whether or not the county's taken into account the fact that there's been a 2-year lapse or a 3-year lapse now from when the money was actually received to when the money's going to be given back. I'm wondering if the county's going to account for the lost interest. I know that myself, I was put into a situation where over the last year, the county held on to my money instead of refunding it when this issue first came up because there were 2 members of the board who wouldn't vote for it last time. And I could have used that money. I was out of business. I didn't make any money last year. And so not having that money and having the county hold on to my money when I was unable to make money otherwise was seriously disadvantageous to my life, my ability to pay bills and to live. And that goes for every single one of us who applied in this program. I would like to know if we're going to have how this money is going to be proportioned and given back to the people who applied. I also think that there are some issues with regard to how the money was spent. I know that there was, in the initial budget accounting, when I looked at it, there was in the line by line, the EIR was paid for out of registrant fees. Now, the EIR was paid for out of urgency ordinance fees. That doesn't seem correct to me. The urgency ordinance was for a limited program that was CEQA exempt. I don't understand why urgency ordinance fees were used to pay for an EIR that ended up being used as a justification to ban us because, as we all know, the board changed midway through. So there were a whole series of costs and expenditures that went into the program that were found to have not been associated with the program. I know that there was a reimbursement made in September of 2017. I'm wondering if the EIR was included in that reimbursement or if that reimbursement had to do with other funds. And more than anything, I think that while people would like the money back and would like to be made whole after the terrible experience that we've all had in the urgency ordinance program, we would like more than that to be able to get back to work and to be able to move forward with our lives, having learned the lessons of the last few years and putting it to good use for the county.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Supervisor Mills, and I know, or maybe it's a comment. It seems to me that you're operating with double standards here, and that you are holding the cannabis program to a completely different standard of any other county program. And I would like to encourage you to allow for the positive aspects of this medication, of the people that are engaged in this community who voluntarily came and signed up for this. I can't help but notice that you're adding a whole layer of stigma to this that is inappropriate. We want to get back to work. We want to follow state and local rules. We paid our taxes when you predicted that we wouldn't pay because it's a cash business and because somehow we're morally deficient, is really the message that I get from you. And I don't appreciate the way that county staff has been being treated as if they are not doing their job, when clearly I have a lot of respect for Rebecca Callan, and I think she does a great job. I just find it insulting that you want an audit. I agree with what my son said about, you know, we have questions about this too, and we would like transparency. But to require more money to be spent of these fees in redundancies that would not be asked for in any other program just seems like you're coming at this with a bias and a prejudice that is inappropriate and demeaning to the position you're in. I just wish that you would back down from this, refund people's money, and reassess your prejudice. Thank you.
I don't pretend to understand all the numbers and everything, but I don't understand why the amount of money and efforts on the count of that the county employees have had to do in order to facilitate the growing of marijuana legally here in Calaveras County. And that's probably as clear as mud, but things should be itemized. People should know, okay, that costs this much for this individual to get this license, and how much did that cost? And nobody kept track of that, and I don't understand that. Because to me, if people spend money for a license, then we should all know how that money was spent, and nobody knows. I just find this ridiculous. And people deliberately did not keep track of each individual account and how much it cost them. And I'm sorry that I'm not as articulate as a lot of people, and I'm intimidated by people that are very intelligent. But there's a certain amount of common sense that comes into play. And to me, if it costs the county money, we're not talking about the effort and the preoccupation that happened in the last 2 years. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about the money. And so I'm sorry. I just feel that there's something wrong and didn't work.
Afternoon, Board. I'm glad, I guess, that you guys are about to refund this money, hopefully. I'd like to, the original reason, or one of the reasons that I last gave a bunch of money to the county for this was for a renewal of my license. And the hopes was that it would keep me operating. It was before, the prior board decided to ban, and I had to renew my urgency ordinance thing, and I gave you guys some more money. And the idea was that I could keep my business, and I don't have that business anymore. And I would prefer that to this refund, but I'll still take the refund. It'll work. But I would also like to point out something about this refund. My payroll was greater than 50 times what this refund is. Those were all local boys and girls that were coming and getting paid and spending that money locally. 50 times what you're about to give back to me for what you took from me last year. My business did more in revenue than the entire refund you're about to give back to this entire population. And there was hundreds of businesses like mine. The economic effect of this ban, which is the reason that you have to give back this money, is devastation. And I would like my job back, but I'll take the money you took from me back instead. Thank you.
Again, if you'd like to speak, if you could please stand up so we can keep track of how many more we've got to go through.
Afternoon, Mark Bolger, Rimrock Farms. This isn't really a question, but sort of a clarification. So both myself as an applicant and then one of my tenants at a property that I own, we both have filled out the claim forms, and there's been several iterations of them through planning. So it's my understanding that the renewal fee and the original application fee had been bifurcated. Therefore, people that had done the secondary, $5,000 installment would have a greater share of the overall monies. It seems to me, from what CAO Lopez said, is that the monies had been pooled together, that it was refunds for original applications and renewals. That's great. I mean, I've got the utmost confidence that staff's going to get this right. I'm not concerned about that. I would just like clarification that, it has been, the refunds will come in 2 different tracks. Beyond that, I mean, there's a lot of people, as Mr. Schufelt said, that, their business have been shut down. They've maybe moved, lost their property, trying to not lose their property. A lot of people could use that money. I mean, me personally, I gave that money, the renewal 18 months ago. I made the first payment when I didn't even have gray hair. And yeah, maybe the last couple years have added to that. But me personally, keep the money, put it towards my next registration, get us back to work. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Vicki Reinke, Calaveras County. I know this came up in October, and I got up and spoke, and my feelings have not changed. We want to know why this money is being given back. I don't believe we give back money for other permitting process that we do in this county for building or anything like that. So here's my comments. That we need an accurate explanation as to why this is being refunded. And I did hear Rebecca say, why they're doing it. And so, I'll take that and take that to heart, that they're refunding it because they didn't spend it. But I can't imagine why we didn't spend it. So I wanted to go back and talk about the urgency ordinance of May of 2016. In that ordinance, there were line items there. One said, must have been a grower prior to May 10th of 2016. So these were people who were already growing marijuana, making money, doing their thing, but they got to come in for a permit because they were already growing marijuana in our county. Collect from registrant a regulatory program fee. To me, that when I read that in that ordinance, I thought, okay, well, they're going to pay some money up front to have a program in our county. Such fees shall cover the cost of administrating, implementing, and enforcing this chapter. Okay, so there's an enforcement piece that I have not seen yet. I don't think, has anybody gone out and looked at these properties yet to see if they are in compliance now with the ban? I haven't heard that that's done. That's enforcement. That's money that should be used for that. And the fee was $5,000, which we all thought, wow, that's pretty low for people who get up here at the microphone and say they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars on their property, on their growing of their marijuana. So, $5,000 was nothing. Then the county may conduct a fee study. This is part of this same section of the urgency ordinance. County may conduct a fee study to determine the total cost of administrating this chapter. We've never seen that. We've never seen a study that said, and this was in the ordinance. And then the registration application that everybody filled out in, I believe it was July and August of 2016. It has stated very clearly on that the fee collected is non-refundable regardless of whether or not a registration or renewal is granted. How much clearer can that be? And it was in bold letters. It wasn't hidden in little type. It's bold letters. These people knew when they came in here they were going to, and it was a temporary program. Everybody knew that. We were all,
Thank you, Ms.
sorry,
Reinke.
thank you.
Okay, so just these 2 left? Missing anyone? 1 more, 2 more, 3 more. All right, thank you. Let's keep going.
Al Segala, Taxpayer Association. The Taxpayer Association didn't get involved in the being for or against marijuana. We were more concerned with the property rights aspects of it and good government. And this is a complex issue, and we're thankful for our auditor, the work she's done to try to get this down to a point where it can be resolved regarding the money that's being held. There's a basic morality involved, and I think people really understand it, even though it's not talked about very much. And the basic morality is you keep your agreements, and you honor the rights of others. It's not a complicated morality, and it works in business, works in government, it works everywhere, particularly in our Constitution. So the first question would be, did the county honor its agreement? Even though in bold type it might say, we're going to confiscate your money, it may not have, when a person writes a contract that's out of balance or actually oppressive, the courts always rule against the person that writes that contract. So you could have in a contract that they sign in order to have their farm, you must kill yourself after you first grow. If they refuse to kill themselves, well, they're in violation. But however, that ordinance is not legal and cannot be binding because it's not, it's immoral. Well, so the first question is, did the county honor its agreement? Well, obviously no. They canceled the program after taking people's money. The second part is honoring the rights of others. Are we honoring the rights of people that made these contributions or not? And I think what we're seeing here is an attempt to do exactly that, to honor a county obligation to these people. I don't think it's more complex than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill, I'd also like to emphasize one more time that everybody's being well-behaved, nobody's sniping at each other, and let's not start. I haven't picked up this gavel yet, and I really don't have any intention to use it. Bill, your microphone's yours.
I'm sorry? Well,
You're up.
okay, board. I don't know what you were talking about, but let's not go there.
Talking about everybody being polite, Bill.
Okay, whatever. When I was reading the submittal here, the words that stuck out to me most were close the program out. And I think what you're trying to do is end this legacy, end this black stain on the county that's existed for 3 years of a colossal mistake that was made. None of you were here when it first happened, but we were told a $5,000 fee would pay for everything. We then find out a year or two later from someone else it could be as high as $11,000. We have applications that have 2 inspections and some that have 10. We have applications where they grew for 2 years with 1 fee. We have grows out there now that still have not been cleaned up or inspected. And yet you want to take this money and give it back now. I understand. You're done with it. You want the mistakes to go away so you can start over again. Well, I'm telling you, another colossal mistake is not going to fix this one. When you start looking at what we did over the past few years of trying to find out how much did this cost the county? What was the net to the county or the net cost? You have to go to the sheriff's office, you have to go to code compliance, you have to go to the auditor's office, you have to go to environmental health. Any department that was involved in this program at all had a legitimate access or a claim on some of that money. Every time I ask, and I came to this podium multiple times over the last 3 years, trying to find out how much this costs the county. Are the taxpayers of this county supplementing this illegal activity, or is it paying for itself? And Mr. Mills is right. Everyone else who feels that they are owed money back from fees in the county, by the county, has to apply for a refund. Those applications should be handled one at a time. All of them have a different cost basis. And I defy any of you, with all of your authority, to find out where were the costs incurred, who was keeping track of it. We heard from a CAO about 3 times removed, telling department heads, do not send the information to the auditor. Keep that information secret. The auditor, bless her heart, came up and said, I don't have that information. I wasn't keeping track of it. How do we reconstruct this? Is it an audit? It's a forensic audit. We've got to find out what the cost is first, because the citizens of Calaveras County are supplementing this, and not 1 nickel should go back unless we decide that it's due to that person on an individual basis. Thank you.
Come on, one of you two's got to step up.
Proponent Randall Smith, District 4. From what I've heard today and what I've heard before is that we have county council, auditor controller, CAO, people that know the law. They cited, I believe it was Prop 26. This is really not a debatable issue. You had a program, it doesn't exist, and there's money left over. It's a pretty straightforward proposition here. And if I may, considering the fact that my family and I just fired Supervisor Callaway as our supervisor, I'd like to address my new supervisor, Supervisor Mills. Sir, I get it that you didn't want to vote for this back in October. It was a political decision. I get it, but this isn't politics. This is finance. This is state law. There shouldn't be anything political about this at all. To me, it's a straightforward proposition, and I just urge the board, I would like to see a 5-0 vote for this. I think it would go a long way to maybe mitigating some of the more negative things we've seen in the last few years. And so I just ask you sincerely, please, just go ahead and do the rightful thing and follow the law, sir. Thank you.
Susan Morse, District 4. Well, we've gone through a lot this afternoon, talking about this, and most of you know that I've been probably not up here, but at least in the meetings for the last 2 years. And I've spent much time when we go through this, hours and hours, as some of you have since the beginning of 2016. In the spirit of transparency and accountability, I'm not sure, and maybe the people who were putting this together didn't even know then what was going on, but it appears to me today, after everything I've listened to, even in the submittal where it said that on January 15th meeting, that there was a direction from the board to, sorry, my brain is exhausted from this. It was a direction of the board to reconsider this issue of refunds. There's no problem. If there's refunds due, of course, refunds should be given. But we show no basis for it yet. You talk about you want a final audit. We've never seen an audit. We've never seen any accountability whatsoever for this. Nothing. In fact, and I think it was October 9th, you were going to move the money over to start paying out refunds, but there was no accounting then. And when you figured it out at the meeting, you wanted to backtrack on the computer without notice to the public, and that didn't work. So then the whole thing got defeated, in my opinion, and I think what is said in here. And what happened? Then on January 15th, it says in the minutes on this submittal that you were going to, that it was directed that they were going to reconsider it for today. It wasn't, I didn't hear it in view when I viewed the video, and it wasn't in the agenda then. So what I'm asking for is accountability from each one of you. Transparency from each one of you. Because the public, we don't have any information. Maybe there is information about how much the program costs and so forth, and there's money left over. But that's all we hear. One time, the previous board chair had mentioned in a public meeting that, and I think maybe even here too, that there was some sort of a nexus report, and it came up to be cost about $11,000 per registrant. Well, we never saw that study. To my knowledge, it's never been given out. I have never seen it. I don't know what it is. I think the public has the right for you people to be transparent and to give us the information. If it comes out that that's what it should be, then that's what it should be. But how do we know that? We don't know that. The only way you can do that is to have an independent audit be done.
Thank you very much.
Please do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, one more speaker after Tom. Anybody else? All right, ma'am, you'll be our last speaker. Excuse me, Neil, you'll be our last speaker.
Yeah, speaking of the Nexus study, I do find it interesting that it's been held in administrative review and never been released, and it was due to be released within a first year. What's really amusing about it to me is how people from here and certain apparently privileged members of the public keep quoting this $11,000 figure from a thing that they can't know about. Interesting. I have questions that, if possible, since Rebecca Callan is still here, and she would probably be the person who knows. Something that I've always been curious about is assets that on your taxes would be depreciable, like vehicles, AR-15 assault rifles to help enforce the regulations, things that didn't really get used, let alone used up during the duration of the program. My $5,000 that I paid after the program had officially ended by any legal basis, that it was for 2 weeks of just existing on paper, so I didn't lose my state license. And I would like to mention also that people who have submitted a demand letter, as I have, 45 days or more ago, under state law can now go take the county to small claims court to recover these fees that are legally due to be repaid. And also, I'll add mine to the voices that say, yeah, applied, rather you keep the fees and reapply them so that we could be in business going forward, but only if you do it in a time when most of us can actually still be in business instead of after we officially can't. And on the audit topic, you've talked a lot about what county council defines as legitimate. If you're going to do an outside audit and spend money from a program that no longer exists, which is legally questionable in my opinion at this point, are you going to have outside legal counsel audit our council's opinions? Because our council tends to defend you. And what is the value of an independent audit without an independent legal evaluation of if you're able to charge for the things that you're charging for? And if the audit were to be unfavorable, how happy would you be that you did it then? Anyway, I'll stop for now. Thank you very much. I hope you just do the simple right thing and do a refund now while it's simple and clean.
Hi, my name's Tracy Zellers, and I live in Jack Garamendi's District 2 in Glencoe. My family and I have been here for real close to 20 years. We've raised 2 kids here, and now we have 4 grandkids here. And we're not the typical people that came up here just to get rich from this, but we believe in it. We believe in cannabis as a medical cure-all for a lot of different things. I grew up in the 60s and 70s. I never was into smoking it for myself or getting high or doing any of that. I believe in it for a different purpose. We thought we could pay all the fees that the county wanted and do something legally because we had grown up on our property for 10 years or so because we're in the middle of nowhere. We had 40 acres and we could grow what we wanted and what we could give away to friends and neighbors and people that we met that needed it for specific purposes that we thought it could help. We're not wealthy people. We're not farmers, but we dipped in and we paid our $5,000, and after all of the ban and everything happened, it just felt to me like a bait and switch. The line that she read in the contract, I remember reading that, but I remember thinking, there's so many people here doing this today. It was a zoo here doing what we did to get approved. And I never thought that it would come to this. I wouldn't have normally spent $5,000. That was a lot of money for our family. And then on top of that, the taxes and the sheriff's department and all the things that we had to do, but we did it willingly, thinking that it was going to be a good thing. And I haven't been to a lot of these meetings, but I've watched a lot of them, and these rooms used to be filled with people mad about the fact that we were able to grow cannabis here. And all those public people that were against it, they're not here now when we just want a little bit of money back. We're not asking for much. We're either asking to be able to grow again and use that money towards, I know some of these people have. We just feel like we kind of got ripped off a little bit. I not only live where I live, we just sold one. We owned 5 properties here. I pay my taxes. I'm just an average citizen. People don't meet me and say, "Oh, I wonder what she does for a living." I'm just making it through, trying to do what I can. And it's just been a really rough, going on 3 years now, to deal with all this. And as far as we have had to eradicate our property. My husband's somewhat disabled and he couldn't do it. He just had to have 2 young people come up and completely eradicate the 3,000 square foot fenced in property that nobody could see. And the water board has pictures, and they did make sure that we did what we were supposed to do. Otherwise, I would have had to pay them another 1,000, which would have brought that up to 3 for them. So do the right
Thank you very
thing.
much. Last speaker.
Neil McEwen. It's been 3.5 years since the fire, and it has been incredibly hard. And dealing with investing everything I had left into a business that was legal and approved, only to have it taken away, and struggle to take care of my family that has been dealing with the impact of the fire. At the same time, it all has had such a huge toll. And I mean, I can use that money right now. But at the same time, I would say keep it. Let us get back to work. So much invested in our land that we all take the best care of. We're county verified, all of us, that we're approved. We're following the best management practices, farming organically. There was no silent poison. And those of us that are still left really deserve the chance to try and make something out of this still. The hurdles that we face getting state licensure are gigantic. Competing in this market that has evolved into this point is going to be incredibly hard. But that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility would be, please, let us get back to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the board. Further discussion or motion? Oh, sorry. Madam Auditor Controller?
I just wanted to answer a couple of questions or touch on some of the questions that were asked. As far as the EIR, I'd have to go back and look at the invoices that we got for the EIR, but if I recall, a portion of the EIR was paid for using this funding source, but the other portion was not. And that basis was because there was a portion of the EIR with regards to whether a ban, you know, and what the implications were. So it wasn't, county council didn't feel it was appropriate to have the entire thing paid for with the program, which I agreed with. So, but I would have to look at how much was. I'm not positive off the top of my head. As far as number of applicants we're talking about for refund, with regards to what Mr. Bolger was asking, we've always kept track of the original applicant number and the renewal number. And so we know what portion of money is in that fund related to the renewals and how many there are. And we also know how many of the original applicants are still in there in that fund. And we've always kept that together in the fund, but segregated in terms of how that came to be. And so those refunds, again, this is based on board direction, but the historical direction has been to treat the refunds separately. Renewals are one way, and then the non-renewals, the original applicant monies are treated differently. Because the renewals, when they paid them, the ban is in effect. There, in essence, is no program, right? So theoretically, there is no ongoing costs to bear on that $5,000 that they paid for the renewal. So the consensus at that point from the board was you kind of look at it two pathways. One is refunding of renewals, and one is refunding of the original application. There was a comment of, we don't refund any other fees. We refund fees every day, all day long. And it just depends. And we also, it certainly helps emphasize when a fee is not high enough or is too high if the department or the departments that are utilizing that as a funding source keep cost accounting. But sometimes it's just not cost effective to do that. And that was a discussion early on with regards to do we treat each one of these applications like we would with a code compliance violation, where you track your time associated to that particular administrative complaint. And at the time, the discussion that happened was, no, you know, it will kind of average it out. So some might be a little higher, some might be a little lower, but we think it'll average itself out. I don't get to make that policy, and I can offer lots of suggestions. And then if the board and the administrative office don't think that they want to put that burden on a department, there's really not a lot that I can do. I can tell you, you know, I kind of saw the writing on the wall. You know, if I could take the information I know today and use that as backup back then, because I did say, if you as a board approve an urgency ordinance for commercial cannabis, and that's really what we're talking about. The urgency ordinance was specific about commercial cannabis, personal caregiver, and or personal grow and caregiver grows, and it was all specific to medicinal use. It wasn't recreational. There was a very confined rule about what those applications were going to be for. But we guessed that, and this wasn't just me, this was the sheriff's department, the district attorney's office, and environmental health, and everybody who came to the table, planning, county council, that there was a possibility, because we were on the fringe of doing something that no other agency was prepared to go forward with. We knew that there could be consequences to that, unforeseen consequences. And if anyone recalls, that was a big reason why we needed to ensure that we had some sort of tax in place as well, because the regulatory fees were not intended to pay for everything cannabis. It wasn't intended to just be this catch-all of every possible expense that our county could be forced to face, whether it was environmental impacts or just unknown things that we didn't know were going to happen, but we had a guess that we didn't know everything, and we were very correct in that. So that's why it was very important that a fee was there as well as a tax, because the tax could be the catch-all for all of the other things that we just didn't have developed in the urgency ordinance. And I think that that has been part of the struggle that departments have had, the board has had, the public has had, is there's in essence a line. This is regulatory, this is non-regulatory. Even when we're talking about enforcement, there's a difference between enforcement on regulatory and enforcement on non-regulatory. But there's still a very confined framework on what we can use the regulatory fees for. And that has kind of been the crux of our problem here, and the debates and the arguing. And, you know, and we've tried to give you as much information as we can. Way back when, at the very beginning, I suggested we should probably keep track of two costs, one for regulatory, one for non-regulatory, but that is an impact, an unintended consequence of allowing commercial cultivation in our county. And again, the decision was made, no, we don't want to do that. Well, fast forward, you want to know what those costs were, the public wants to know what those costs were, and there is an argument that they should be tied to the regulatory fee. Again, we're talking apples and oranges. So, you know, it's a struggle. We know that cannabis overall, overreaching, costs more than the regulatory program, but the regulatory program was never intended to be the catch-all funding source for all things cannabis. It wasn't intended to deal with cartel grows or human trafficking that came along with the cartel grow. It just didn't, none of that was intended to be used for that. So that was the importance of that tax. We have kept a very clear accounting of commercial cannabis and the personal grows and the caregiver grows since day one. We have always had an accounting of that. So if there was ever, you know, I asked for an accounting and we never got an accounting, there has always been an accounting for that, always. The issue was the debate on what could be included in the regulatory account and what could not. And when we have a difference of opinion, then we have to take time to try to figure out, well, who is right? You know, county council and I have one opinion, admin has another opinion. Then a week later, admin has one opinion, I have one opinion, county council has one opinion. The board has a different opinion. Then you have 4 board members who all have their own opinion, or 5. It just has been this struggle from day one. But we have always had an accounting, always. And it has put my office in a very interesting position because I'm at the center of this, and I really shouldn't be, because really I should do the accounting based on what the agreed upon procedures are and allowances and policies, and that's where we just really have struggled this whole time. So I have relied a lot on county council, I've relied a lot on our administrative office, and I've relied a lot on departments. But, you know, we can go back and say we shoulda, coulda, woulda until the cows come home. But the reality is there were decisions that were made early on, and that's what we're stuck with. So what we have right now is, and we close the books on June 30th. So as of June 30th, there is $940,044 of money that is sitting in that regulatory fund, period. And we also had to make a basis of how much more costs can we continue to incur against a program that's banned. And we can go back and argue about what we should have included in the urgency ordinance, what should have been interpreted, and we've gone through everything. We have argued, you know, devil's advocate on both sides to try to be fair and equitable all the way along. And we did ask council for outside opinion just to ensure that we're on the same page, and that opinion came back the same. So I'm happy, not happy with it, I'm confident that that's the decision. Also, you know, when there was kind of a lot more public discussion regarding this money, I went to an auditor's conference, and you would not believe how many auditor controllers said, "What are you guys doing?" There is no question that that is a regulatory program, and if you didn't spend it, you refund it back. There's no question that it's under Prop 26. I know that county council has reached out to their counterparts in county council. So we're talking about 58 counties, 58 auditor controllers and financial officers, potentially 58 county councils, and industry experts have all opined the same that we have. So it's not 3 people that have this opinion, it's hundreds of people. And we can have our own philosophical debates about what we think about cannabis, but at the end of the day, I have to kind of stand back and look at this as a fee. It's a fee just like a dog license fee or a building fee or an environmental health fee. And at this point, I have $940,000 left, and we have to do something with it. And we cannot legally keep it. Now, it's up to the board to decide Do you want us to calculate taxes, or not taxes, interest on it? Fine. That would be a cost to the general fund. If you want to come back and say, we want you to go back and try to figure out what the true cost would have been on each application, it doesn't exist. So our best, most equitable methodology of allocating it is to refund 100% of the renewals on a 100% basis, and then the original applicant's monies, divide that across everybody, average it out. That was the best that we could come up with. And that conversation happened with myself, county council, administration, planning, and we kind of looked at it in a multitude of ways of what we could do, and that was our best strategy.
Thank you. Any further questions from the board?
I have a couple. You answered most everything I have here, Rebecca, and thank you for that. I have one. As an elected official, can you remind us what your title is?
I am the auditor controller.
Thank you. And just for a little more clarity for myself and a few other people, the separation of the renewal money and the original fee, that's just separated within that total of $943,000, or is there a separate fund with those renewal?
No, it's all in one fund, but we know based on the monies coming in what is left. So there were 26 permits, not necessarily 26 applicants, because you could have one applicant that had multiple, but 26 permits for a total of $130,000 of $5,000 each for the renewals.
And those are to be refunded 100%
If that
we
is the
so
board's
choose.
direction, yes. That was our recommendation.
Understood.
There
Thank
were
you.
738 original applicants, less 2 that received refunds. So it was a total of 736 that would actually be a claimant. That doesn't mean that one of them might not still submit a claim, but we would verify that we're only going to have 736 for a total of, and then we estimated about a 5% administrative cost for running a refunding program for a total of $768,741.90. That would be the amount that we would be looking at for the original applicant refunding program.
Thank you.
Oh, and then there was one other comment with regards to how much capital and how much equipment. It was about $314,000 total.
Further questions?
So the capital.
Supervisor Mills?
Thank you, Chair. The capital and the equipment goes where?
It stays with the county.
So we then take a profit?
We basically took the original expense. So if you had a vehicle for $30,000, we paid the full $30,000, took the full $30,000 out of the regulatory money to pay for that vehicle, and that is part of the total $2.9 million that we spent of the program.
My point is, though, is that money was taken out of this regulatory program fee. And we've now taken the asset and we've moved it out of the program.
That is correct.
Have we reimbursed the program for the taking of the asset?
No. So that, and that is what the gentleman's point is if you had equipment or assets and it had longer than a 1-year useful life, then should we only get the benefit of the 1 year, right? And then refund the other 4 years, or do we keep, or do we basically call it a wash? We take the entire original cost of the asset. Again, that is dependent on what the board's direction is.
I think it's really going to be up to the board whether or not they want to engage in the scope of the final audit, or whether they want to discuss it, or whether they just want to leave it in your hands to run it the best way that you can do it.
So, and again, determining what portion of the assets have been depreciated is very simple. I can run a report in 2 minutes to figure that one out. If it was the board's direction to go ahead and refund the program, the 3 years, 4 year, whatever the unused useful life of this equipment was, that would be under direction of the board.
That's a secondary discussion I wanted to have. And on top of that, then, for those people, the board needs to also decide whether they're going to engage in how much is going to be distributed to whom. Because you do have those people who submitted applications, were subsequently denied, went through a whole denial process and costs and expenses involved in that. So whether the board wants to discuss that, I don't know. Or whether it's just going to come down to, here's a number, take it or leave it.
Further discussion or motion?
Yeah,
Supervisor Callaway?
Ms. Calla, under a normal permit process, subdivision map, you pay your $10,000, you cancel the project, you get a refund. Is that with interest? Because it could be over a 2, 3, 4 year period.
We don't pay interest.
On
The only
any-
time that I've ever seen where we've paid interest has been for very specific types of property tax refunds. That's the only time I've actually
Got it,
seen where
okay.
we've had to calculate interest and issue that interest.
Got it, okay, thank you. Given that that's our practice, I would follow that practice with this. On the assets, I would support a refund to the program if the assets no longer charge to that program. I think that's appropriate. And based on what I've heard you say and on the staff report, I support including adjusting the budget to refund the funds as recommended by your office, or by Mr. Lopez's office.
Chair, what if we come up in the discussion about assets, for instance, with more money left in the fund after?
So what I can say in terms of true capital assets, because he had asked assets and equipment, and we do have different kind of tiers and classifications. So of what would have been deemed true capital assets, there was $264,167.60 of that 314. I would have to look at what classifications of assets those are. Some of them could have a 10-year lifespan, some of them could have had a 3, some of them could have had a 5. It just depends. So I'd have to look at which of those assets we're talking about to determine what the non-depreciated value is, and then that would be the basis of refunding that undepreciated value back to the program.
If I might clarify, so if we decided to do that, which we haven't decided to do that yet, that whatever the remaining value would be after the depreciation of that 264, that money would come out of our general fund, right?
Yes.
We would, in essence, be buying these out of the general fund
You would be buying
revenues.
them.
Right, thank you. Supervisor Toffenau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As part of this discussion about assets, we would certainly have to determine if those assets are even being used now. If they're even part of the sheriff, and I'm assuming most of it came out of the sheriff's office, whether those assets are being utilized for any other program that he's running now or his daily uses. There was an item last week before us on valuations and running them on carrying them on our books, asset books. And I think that's part of what needs to be looked at too, is are they being carried on that ledger or not?
They are. Right now they are.
All of them, every of the 240, they are on there. So they're in excess of $25,000 in value.
The 264, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of them, it's a combination between sheriff's equipment and code compliance equipment. That was the majority of it.
Okay. And you are right. We do refunds. Part of the item last week had to do with refunds. We do refunds on a lot of different things, business license,
Yeah.
permits, all kinds of things if people overpaid.
Right, and specifically, we do so many that years ago, the board had approved delegating refunding authority to the auditor controller of refunds less than $5,000. So anything that was $5,000 or less, I actually have the authority to verify the refund and pay it. Where if that wasn't in place, those would have to come to the board all the time. So that was one of the frustrations of the board, because you'd have these little, $150, $250 refund. So that was the basis for approving that resolution way back when.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion or motion on this item?
Chair, I would like to still see some type of a full accounting on this, that these numbers aren't final in the scope of the discussion. So I really would like to see the board discuss the scope of what type of audit they'd like to have.
Maybe if you'd like, Supervisor, we could poll the board and see if there's interest in any.
And clarification on what do you think is not final? So, because again, if this is coming down to a debate on what can be included and what can't included, that's a much wider discussion, and I would ask that the board give direction on what that is.
All right, let me see if I can't get us some direction.
To me, that would be a new agenda item.
If, let me ask you, poll the board, is there interest in having any additional audits on this account?
No.
Supervisor Mills?
Yes.
Supervisor
No.
Steinman? Supervisor Toffenelli?
Here's where I'm at on this. This program is over. It was shut down. Like you said, and you kind of took the words out of what I had here for notes.
Sorry.
As far as, that's fine. As far as we can carry this on for the next 16 years if we want to, and keep bringing it back and serve no purpose. The program is over. It's done. When I came onto this board 2 years ago, there wasn't any department that wasn't fully engulfed in this program, so much so that everything was being put on hold, especially in the building departments, code departments. Planning department was totally engulfed. The general plan was put aside. This thing was just totally consuming, and there didn't seem to be any end in sight. This is the last of this program. And I would just like to see it closed out. Let's just move on. Let's just do what we need to do here. It's no different than giving refunds for excess property taxes, license fees. I got a refund. I bought a new car. I got a refund in the mail because I paid excess fees, and the dealership sent me a refund for it. We're not continuing this program. I can't tell you. I don't have a crystal ball in front of me. If I did have a crystal ball, I would be living next door to Bill Gates or above Bill Gates, because I would not be here. Believe me, I have more money than I need to spend in my entire lifetime, in my children's lifetime, but I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know where this eventually is going in this county. But I do know this program itself is over, and I don't want to continue it at all. So I'm not in favor of doing any audit. I think you and your staff and county council and admin has done an outstanding job tracking these funds. When I first came here and this program was in effect, I heard nothing but complaints about how you were saying, no, you can't charge for this, no, you can't charge for this, no. And it came from one specific department. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. But you kept a hands on it and saying no, and what was AB 26 that we could do. And so I feel confident with what you're saying here today, that the funds that are left over in this program are the funds that were not needed to fund this program unless it continued. If we were continuing this program in one way or another, then like you said, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now. The item in front of us is not only for the refunds, but to move from the line item that it's in to a line item that we can pay out on. And I'm in favor of that. I'm not in favor of going down and continuing to go down. We're going to audit this. Well, what are we going to audit? How do you want to do the audit? What are we going to do with the audit? What are you going to do? This end it. Let's just be done with it and say it was over, and move forward. That's where I'm at.
Thank you. I'm going to try to wrap up this item. So let me see, is there a motion to accept this item as it's written?
I move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a
I'll second, sorry.
motion by Supervisor Callaway, second by Supervisor Stopper. Any further discussion? I'll call the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
4 in favor, opposed by Supervisor Mills. It passes 4-1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to the final item. Supervisor, let me take a second. I'd like to thank the audience for everybody being respectful of each other during that debate. It's much appreciated from the board. Thank you. Supervisor's announcements. Madam Clerk.
In compliance with AB 1234, chaptered as Government Code Section 53232.3D, board members shall provide brief reports on meetings they attended at the expense of the local agency at the next regular meeting of the legislative body. This report is required to include meetings attended for which there has been expense reimbursement, such as mileage, meals, lodging, etc., but may also, at the board member's discretion, include any other meetings attended by the supervisor on behalf of the county.
We'll work our way down the table. Supervisor Tofinelli.
I don't have an expense account, so I didn't have any
Who was the
expenses
last
to the
chair who
county.
did
And so I have nothing to report. I didn't have any committee meetings. They're all either next week or the following week, so.
I'm in the same boat as Gary.
Supervisor Mills.
Yeah, Chamber of Commerce Mega Mixer went very well. I know we had multiple supervisors there, and then the Friends of the Sheriff's event last Saturday. Murphy's Fire next Saturday will be doing their awards dinner, so we'll be attending there for those that might be interested in that.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Callaway.
We're ending an era, and I'd like to bring back an era. I have asked to have the cannabis issue brought back on a study session in March. And after talking to several people involved in the issue, on all sides of the issue, and having talked to our planning director, for us to really bring it forward and to move forward in a new direction, we have to have an ordinance. So to have an ordinance, that means the board has to give direction. And, you know, Mr. McManus, I'm sorry he left because I agree with him. We have over the last few years had mega study sessions on this. But I would like to have a study session in February, very focused study session on giving direction to the planning department on what we would consider in an ordinance. We have to set the parameters, and it's the board that sets the parameters. I support in some way, I'm just throwing out ideas on kind of how I came to this, that we have sort of a pilot program with a limited number of growers, those who were registered prior, those who had submitted, what?
I think we need to just do a poll as to whether we want to bring this up. I don't think we're...
In February? I
Yes,
was
ma'am.
just giving ideas
I know,
about...
but I think we're...
All right, I stand corrected. So the question is, I would like with board support, to bring this issue up for a focused study session in February instead of March, and it has been something I discussed with the planning director because the general plan is high priority. Thank you.
Okay, so the Supervisor Callaway wants to swap the planning meeting, the study session that we had scheduled for February, which was fire preparedness for cannabis, and move fire protection to March. Did I understand that correctly?
Sort of, yes.
Or could we do both? Would we have time? No, probably
I
not.
think it's going to be a big lift, Supervisor.
Just curious.
Let me work with the CAO and we can work on that, but let me judge the pulse of the board. So the question to be polled is, changing our direction from last week to this week would be moving study session on cannabis to February instead of March. Supervisor Tofinelli.
No.
Supervisor Stopper.
I'm willing to consider it.
Supervisor Mills.
General plan, fire preparedness, take priority, no.
Supervisor Callaway.
Yes.
Supervisor Garamendi, yes. So willing to consider, is that a yes vote? Supervisor Stopper?
Yes.
Very well. Board will take this up in February. I will work with the CAO on putting together a study session agenda. Mr. CAO, do you know what date we're looking at in February?
I do not have a date, Mr. Chairman. I can get one, I believe, by email really quickly and respond to the board.
Okay, Madam Clerk thinks the 19th is the date for our study session?
Well, the 19th is the third Tuesday, so my understanding was that's when you wanted to have those types of discussions.
Very well, it'll be February 19th, unless something changes. Is there anything else you'd like to report on, ma'am? Here, you gotta hold it. There you go.
Oh, thank you. I'm participating Wednesday and Thursday in the homeless survey. The areas that I'll be doing with my teammate will be Avery, Dorrington, Camp Connell, and up the hill. So if you have any ideas on where we could go, I have some besides the Lou Room for lunch. I appreciate the feedback. And who is the backup for Central Sierra Child Support? My alternate? Would you be able to go to the meeting on the 28th?
Of this month?
Yes,
What time? 1:30 in Jackson.
1:30 in Jackson.
Just forward the agenda.
I don't have the agenda.
Oh, you know what? Email. That's on Monday, correct?
Yes.
Yes, I have a meeting with Motherload Job Training. That's my
Okay.
first meeting that day, so I cannot make that.
Thank you.
I apologize.
Thank you very much. I have to report that I spent a lot of time with the RCRC this week at our first meeting of the year. I was elected appointed vice chair of the Water and Resources Committee, and I was appointed to the Executive Committee. So, which is a good thing, I think, for our county. We've got if you've been watching legislation, RCRC is very aware of a lot of new legislation being introduced that's going to directly impact counties like Calaveras that are in the fire hazard areas. And we need to watch them very close. Modifications to 4291, insurance legislation, all the things that make us tick up here are going to come up in various pieces of legislation. As a result, I'll be very involved in keeping an eye on those with RCRC, and I will report back regularly to this board because we're going to have to be prepared to react if something comes up that restricts our ability to live the lifestyle in the county that we think is appropriate. So we will continue to fight on that. I have nothing else to report. Mr. CEO, do you have anything you'd like to discuss?
I have nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Madam Council? Madam Clerk?
Yes, I just wanted to say congratulations on your RCRC appointments. And on behalf of Rebecca Turner and I, we enjoyed the RCRC installation last week.
It was a pleasure seeing you both down there. Thank you so much for coming. It's a great group of people. If there's nothing further, this meeting stands adjourned.